share a little more. The conversation series that we're participating in today is our platform to celebrate the accomplishments of St. Mike's alumni. We create opportunities to bring women together, and we focus alumni energy on the needs of today's St. Mike's women, students, faculty, and staff. Our first St. Mike's alumna is Anne Maggisano, who is a CFA charter holder and a vice president of Burgundy Asset Management. She has spent her career educating and empowering women to help them take a leadership role in overcoming social and cultural conditioning and to manage their own wealth and life vision. Our second St. Mike's alumna today is Georgina Steinsky. Georgina's Canadian and international leadership experience centers on creating new organizations and guiding major organizational restructuring and governance reform. As an executive associate with Sutton Associates, Georgina is a sought-after advisor to philanthropic organizations around the world. And our moderator, St. Mike's alumna, Brenda Sweeney, graduated with an honors Bachelor of Arts and in political science, and then completed a Master's of Science in Journalism at Syracuse. Degrees in hand, Brenda began her career adventure. For many years, Brenda championed British, American, and Canadian tech innovators, traveled the world in product and business management roles. After a period in strategic communications, Brenda is now a trusted advisor in governance, strategy, and reputational risk for boards and leaders in public and private sectors.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. To many of us, this is St. Joe's 29, but in its new life, this is reincarnated. Thank you as Regis College. So welcome to all of our friends who were day students, resident students, or maybe people who were here as professional faculty who lived here or lived on campus but studied across campus. So we welcome all of you. We're excited to be here. And what we're going to do is quickly go into a little bit about the experience first, about our guest speaker's experience. Can you hear okay? Yes, okay. So first we'd like to tell us, if you could each tell us a little bit about your experience at St. Mike's and how it shaped your career or your life trajectory. Maybe Georgina. Thank you.
Well, just a little background. I was in fact not. Is this working now?
Yeah.
I was in fact not a resident. I was a day student, but have spent many years before university in this environment because I went to St. Joseph's College School next door. Therefore, was very familiar with the Sisters of St. Joseph and all the wonderful work that they did. With respect to the role of St. Mike's, I think St. Mike's continued for me a trajectory of a set of value building, which I had really started to be formed into as a child. One of my formative experiences in terms of value, thinking about one's society and doing something for one's society came when I was in grade 1. And we were asked by the teacher, who wants to be president of the Red Cross Society? So we had to run for election, but the idea was that you then encouraged your fellow students as president of the Red Cross Society to raise money for the Red Cross. So that is at a very young age instilled in me the notion that you have to look at your broader community and that you should be doing something for it. And certainly when I came to St. Mike's, that was something that was also instilled in us here. I was very active on I'm not sure if it's called student council now, but there was a student council, and so I always, and I was really inspired by some of the priests here. Father Madden was a big mentor to me, for those of you who may remember him. And I always felt that the values that I had kind of adopted as a child were really continued here with St. Mike's.
St. Mike's and is it on? No, just here, take this one.
For me, St. Mike's living at Loretto was hugely formative in my career, and you mentioned some of the amazing women who inspired. There we go. You mentioned some of the amazing women who inspired me when I was living on campus, and they're in the back row right there. So I just want to recognize them. I came to the University of Toronto with a mission. I was sort of very good at sciences, and it was very much expected in my family that I would continue on that trajectory and hopefully become a doctor, which was very much validated in my family. And so when I was living on campus, I was doing all the science courses, but we would get together for dinner at Loretto College, and I'd be around all these amazing women who would be talking about history and politics and philosophy and the amazing things that are happening in the world. And I felt that I couldn't contribute to the conversation. And that sense of sort of a desire to contribute, but a not knowing how to, stuck with me. I did eventually finish my science degree and ended up working with a migraine neurologist here at Women's College Hospital. But because I was on campus, I thought, why don't I go back and take a course in fine art history? And I did, and I loved it, and it opened the world to me. And I took another course and another course and another course in film studies. But I would say that experience of being in Loretto, being around people who sort of were introducing me to ideas that my family couldn't introduce me to and that I didn't have access to, was very much a catalyst for this new entry to understanding the world in a much bigger way. And that second degree, that art history and film degree, has been hugely formative in terms of my own career. I find myself in the investment business now, but I think my art history and film degree is my competitive edge in that business. And I would not be doing the work that I am doing with women to empower women around money if I had not had access to the ideas of feminism that I learned in art history and in film studies.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll just have to share, it looks like. Thank you. So one of the things we wanted to do in exploring the theme we had today which is women and the impact of their money. Anne was very kind and shared a report from the TD Bank's 2023 Women in Philanthropy report and some of the important statistics within that. So just to help frame the conversation today, here are a few facts about women in philanthropy from this report. Women are increasingly vital to the charitable sector in all dimensions, as donors, employees at all levels, as volunteers, and board members. Donations claimed by women in annual tax filings increased from 1.5 billion in 2011 to 4.3 billion in 2021, so a factor of 400%. At current rates of growth, donations claimed by women are projected to reach 5.9 billion by 2030. Giving by women is motivated by a number of factors, including family experiences, social awareness, the influence of friends, and growth in financial resources. A recent study of Canadian donors undertaken by Blackbone indicated that in the preceding 12 months, 65% of women focused their generosity on 4 or fewer charities. The study also suggests that donors in the 35 to 54-year-old age cohort are most likely to concentrate their giving. That is, not to spread it among many different charitable organizations, but to choose 4 or 5 ones that matter most to them. An increasing number of female donors are using giving vehicles, such as private foundations, and I believe that's creating their own private foundations, and donor-advised funds as ways to administer their strategic donations, although they do tend to shy away from taking professional advice as to the direction of their giving, which is a point we're going to explore today. It's an interesting one. And those were the main points. So what we'd like to do then is just to start with that information in hand, start to explore that. And the sort of the goal of these sessions for the conversation series is to let our guest speakers run with it. So we just have a few questions that just prompt the dialogue. And then I'll let them speak, and then we will have a set time at the end for questions. We're trying to allow 15 to 20 minutes for questions, so there'll be plenty of time for you to talk or to engage with our speakers. So the first one is, Anne, could you comment on this statistic about women having more money to give? And what's been your experience with women's access to money?
Good question.
Yeah.
Let me frame it with a little bit of context. I've been in the investment business since 2005 and sort of been empowering women around money since 2014. So we've reached a decade of doing that work. And one of the things that's very exciting about women and money right now is that we're on the cusp of a huge transfer of wealth to women. So over the next decade, and actually it's already happening, there is a transfer of women between, within marriages, for example, because women tend to live longer than their husbands. And so women tend to inherit a significant amount of wealth. And then you also think of sort of the next generation. There's also going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, a very big transfer of wealth to women. And those women who are in the next generation, I would say that they're my generation, are really sort of getting empowered and learning what to do with their money and how to manage their money. But for the generation that came before, there were certainly some cultural, social, and historical norms, and I would love Georgina to talk about this, that really were barriers for women when it came to money, and that limited women's ability to come to the table and learn how to manage money. And we've seen this firsthand in the work that we do at Burgundy, and some of the work that we're trying to overcome and sort of help women feel like they can come to the table. But some of the barriers in the cultural conditioning that would limit women's access to money, for example, would be legally in the States until I believe it was 1974, single women couldn't have access to credit. Until 1978, if you got pregnant, you could legally be fired in the States. So you can understand that, and just for some context, I was born in 1975. So when I was born, these rules were in existence. So for my parents' generation, for my mother, there were real legal constraints to her ability to make money and also to access credit, which limited her capacity to be an investor. And then you look at the family norms, and within my family, I'll share my experience, but my dad was very much the income earner in the family, and my mom stayed at home. And over time, what that meant is that sort of like it normalized the idea around men sort of being responsible for money and being the steward of wealth, and women not having a role in there, or having a more dependent and supportive role. And so those are some of the historical legacies that we're working with. And Georgina, maybe you can comment on your own personal experience.
Well, I think what Anne is saying is, I'm a generation older than she is. The radicalizing document for me, if any of you are interested in the history, was the Royal Commission on the Status of Women in the late 1960s. And that basically documented what Anne is saying about the US was also going on in Canada. And the dramatic change that happened in the 70s and 80s was the huge entry of women into the workforce, which meant that they were making their own money. And I contrasted in my working life, in the 70s when I was working as a historian and governor in Canada, I was embarrassed to talk about the fact that I had a child. And I was always the only woman in the room. In the 1980s, when Brian Mulroney promised to improve the representation of women at the senior levels of the public service, he named 5 of us out of 40 as deputy ministers. Now that is totally radically changed, and I think what it shows is that there's now a huge opportunity, because in the 50s and 60s, women were very involved as volunteers. They were very dependent on their husbands. The Royal Commission documented that with a great amount of data. And the change was, as they entered the workforce and they got their own money, they were then able to make decisions on their own about getting involved in society, about the causes that they would wish to support versus making joint decisions with their husbands, because in the end, in the 50s and 60s, the husbands were the ones who were bringing in the money and therefore were always involved in the decision. So I see this period that we're in now, where you have women who are very active, who control their own money, and even women who are inheriting money from their husbands. There's a different attitude, and there are many resources now for women, and there are also far more role models, I think, for women who are doing exciting things. And I think the other aspect that is interesting about that TV study is that it's basically saying that women who do engage with philanthropy are very research oriented, they are very strategic, and a lot more who are entrepreneurs also tend to start businesses that also have a social impact. So it just, to me, all this spells a real opportunity, and I'm very excited to see that, because I've lived in a different era. I've been a kind of transition generation, and I think it's very exciting to see where it's going.
You did say you wanted to be free-flowing, so
Go right ahead.
I admire your willingness to give up control. The report is stating that women are going to have more money in the sort of, but I want to be very clear from what I'm seeing. Just because women inherit more money doesn't mean that there will be more money going to philanthropy. And that's a lot of the work that I've been doing, is really trying to get to the root cause of why are women unable to freely give to areas of their choice, or unable to freely be in relationship with money where they are able to use the money that they need to take care of themselves and to take care of their family, and understand that they have the capacity to give. So often, historically, when you read examples, you'll read stories, or you'll see in the philanthropy sector that women hold on to their money, and then maybe there'll be a big legacy gift at the end of their life. And you sort of wonder, well, that's obviously a very valid way of giving, but there are other ways of giving that are becoming much more popular and much more normative now, which is sort of giving during your lifetime, so that you can participate in the benefit of seeing your gift being appreciated and validated and changing someone's life, and you can be part of that journey. But in order to get to that, women really need to understand sort of that the very root causes, how much money they have, how much money they need to live, to take care of themselves, to take care of their families, and what is their capacity to give on top of that, and sort of participate in philanthropy in that meaningful way.
So one of my other incarnations was as CEO of an organization now known as Imagine Canada. And Imagine Canada does a great deal of research about the nonprofit sector and charities in Canada, and also trends in giving. And one of the things, just to piggyback on what Anne is saying, is that recently at their AGM, actually, their top researcher was showing trends in giving from 1997 to 2020 based on CRA filings. So this would be when people filed it for, they've given a charitable donation, they've got a receipt, and then the data is collected by CRA. And one of the alarming things for me was that, and it's been a growing trend, is that the number of donors is going down. The gifts are larger, even when adjusted for inflation, the gifts are larger, but the number of donors is going down. So I think it's corroborating what Anne is saying, that there's a huge education role to be played here about the opportunity of giving as you go. And just commenting anecdotally for my generation of friends about sitting on your money till you die. I have a number of friends, and I don't know if this is a social thing that happens, who are terribly afraid that they're not going to have enough money to live as they get older, particularly if their husbands have gone. They're not sure that they can depend on their children. And I always tease them when I say, yeah, you're going to be a Louis Vuitton bag lady. But, you know, that is one of the cultural barriers, I think. And I think certainly I would say my generation was trained. You have to make your own money. You have to save your own money. You have to look after yourself as you get older. And if you look at the demographic data, of course, it's still the case that women tend to outlive their partners. And even if they have partners, because there are more and more women who do not have partners. So I think that is one of the big challenges that we're facing.
This is free flowing, it's great. Keep going.
I do want to comment, because it does come down to education. And so you know, there's lots of success stories where women sort of get to a point where they understand the language of investing and they understand the language of money, and they sort of then can get to a point where they feel comfortable. So this is a positive, aspirational message that's sort of like learning about money and learning and thinking about your relationship with money, and thinking about how you relate to money, and how much you learned from your parents that maybe was useful for them, but may no longer be useful for you or valid for you. Learning how to undo a lot of the belief systems that you might have inherited from your parents, and going on this new journey of what might be possible and how you might contribute to the world through philanthropy. And I also want to comment on that second point, which you mentioned around the decreasing number of philanthropists, because I think that that's very worrying. Philanthropy ultimately is about love of mankind. And I find, and I worry if philanthropy is going to be just narrowed to a small sector of the population. that feels like they have the capacity to give, where there's a certain class, for example, where they have sort of the capacity and the willingness to give, and they feel like it's appropriate for them based on their financial level. Because I think sort of at the end of the day, philanthropy is about shaping the future of the world that we're in. And it would be wonderful to know that philanthropy is accessible to everyone and that everybody has a choice and a voice around what the future holds. And so I find that statistic quite worrying. And I think that there's some work there to be done to make sure that people feel that philanthropy is available to everyone and there's a role for everyone to play in philanthropy.
And I think part of that education also is not just about, well, you give money. Because I think the TV report also highlights that a lot of women who do engage in philanthropy also see it as a way to influence society, to advocate for social change or different kinds of societal change. And I think that it's that whole notion that it's something that is a total engagement for you. It's not just you write the check. You also get engaged perhaps as a volunteer. You get to change, you get to advocate perhaps on a public policy realm for structural changes in society that are required. Because a lot of people who do give are also well educated and they can actually give a great, people in this room who've been lucky to have a university education. There's a lot that can be done often for charities who need a voice at the public level, the governmental level, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal, for change that can make the charities' work more effective. And so I think we need to think about this more broadly as a kind of a transformational opportunity.
So I'll just steal it back. We're gonna fight over the mic. I don't want to take the mic, but I just want to follow up on one question because I think there was a part that was important to explore, which is you talked about the need for education to help women understand how they're not going to end up as the proverbial bag lady, but also to help them understand how to donate. And what do you think is part of that transformation? What empowers women to think they can donate, whether it's their gift of time, their gift of money, or their gift of support? Do you want to start with that?
You want me to start? So the question is, what empowers women? I think it's, you have to have a sense of, first of all, if you have the resources, but you don't need huge resources, okay? I think it's the sense that you're looking around your society and saying, what's going on around me? And, you know, we saw through COVID that this sense of isolation, social isolation, was a huge risk. And I just think it's kind of getting out there that you don't need to be socially isolated. I mean, there's lots that can be done with other people. So I think that's where it starts, is the sense that says, I don't need to be socially isolated. I've either had a good life or I'm living a good life. And I want to look around me and see what there is in my community. Now, if you look at the kind of philanthropic literature on why people give, there's more American literature on this, it's usually to some cause that they have some emotional attachment to. It can be either a traumatic experience which they've come out of, which is usually ends up with the healthcare sector. It can be something transformative in terms of the art world, that they become attached to or learn about a particular artist or a particular program that may be benefiting children, let's say run by a museum. So I think it's really two things. One is, what are my values telling me that's important to me about my society? And then secondly, what am I equipped to do about that? And it may be time, it may be my brains, helping people get organized, it may be writing a check, it may be all of the above, or perhaps other ways. And we're just reaching out and making friends. I think that would be the way to approach it.
Yeah, I would just echo your comments and say, you know, finding an alignment with a cause or an issue that is really meaningful to you personally I'll share that I'm on 3 boards. I'm the chair of the Toronto Public Library Foundation Board, and I'm also on the board of the Canadian Opera Company and Crow's Theatre. And my connection to the arts, of course, sort of started with my degree here. And when I made the decision to go into investing, I made a promise to myself that I would not lose my connection to the arts because it fuels me. Like very deep inside me, there's an emotional, intellectual engagement that is happening when I am experiencing art at the highest level. And so I want to invest in that. I want Toronto to have world-class art. It's important to me. And one of the things you realize when you go through the pandemic and all of a sudden organizations sort of their roles or our experience of what we can experience in the city is taken away from us. You really realize what's important and what's valuable and what we need to protect and what we need to nurture. So, we had 2 years where there was no arts because people couldn't get together to perform and we couldn't gather together to participate in theater. And we lost a lot. And so now, sort of having gone through that experience, you can't take that for granted, and we have a role to play. So finding that alignment in terms of something that is deeply meaningful to you is really important. The second thing I'll say, since I've been on the board since 2014, is over time, what happens is you may start with an alignment with an issue or a cause, but over time, what becomes really powerful is you become connected to a community of people who also care about those things. And they have the same value system, what you were talking about, Georgina, that you do in terms of what is important and what is worth investing in and what is worth nurturing. And that's where I've made a lot of my friends. And I now am engaged in these organizations and in these communities because I care about the issue, but also because I have a community of people there who I like hanging out with, and we all sort of are motivated by that same cause. So there's something very powerful about that community aspect when you are engaged in philanthropy that is really important and meaningful to your life and can be meaningful to your life.
Well, we're doing true confessions. One thing that I was looking at, preparing for this panel, I was looking at the thread of my philanthropic involvements in terms of volunteer time, expertise, and money. And if I draw the thread between the Battersea Museum, the Monk School, and even the West Park Hospital Foundation, a lot of this is linked to my immigrant background coming from Czechoslovakia. I ended up being on the Battersea Museum because I worked for the Bata Company and went back to the Czech Republic and helped reestablish them there after the fall of the Berlin Wall. That really reconnected me with my Czech roots. And then Sonia Bata, when I got to Imagine Canada, called me up, oh, now you know about the philanthropic sector, you have to come and be on my board. And now with the Battersea Museum, I have reconnected with my public service background because one of the areas I worked in was Indigenous land claims in the 1970s. And of course now there's a very large issue about appreciating Indigenous history in Canada. And we at the Battersea Museum have a significant collection of Indigenous art from around the world, actually, including some Canadian art. And of course, we're trying to grapple with when groups who feel they have historic connection to a particular belonging, as it's called, how do we deal with that? So one of my jobs has been to figure out how do we handle that. So what I'm seeing there are threads of connection that you develop. My involvement with Monk School is to make the Czech Republic and visible in the Center for European and Russian Eurasian Studies. So you can kind of think about your life and you can link it back. West Park Hospital Foundation, I had a double hip replacement and I desperately needed rehab and they helped me out. So, these things happen sometimes serendipitously because you've got certain life experiences.
Thank you very much. And as I reflect on what you're saying, I can see that similar thread. My involvement has always been with youth and young people. That's one of the reasons I like to volunteer here at St. Mike's, but it's also a reason I've been a volunteer with Scouts Canada for 20 years. And I'm still a Cub leader because I love working with kids and I love developing their interests and getting them outdoors. So it doesn't have to be, as you're saying, it doesn't have to be about money. It has to be about your interest. And as small as you want to give in terms of time, or as much as you feel you have time, especially as you get toward years where you have retirement or you can manage your own time if you're an entrepreneur. to a degree. But what I'd like to explore now is a little bit about, do you see on the other side of the coin? So we've talked about women as donors, but do you see any changes in how charitable organizations perceive women? They probably thought of them as wives before. What do they think about them now?
Well, I think first of all, if you look at the stats of leadership in charitable organizations, there's a very large dominance of women leadership. And women have always historically been the dominant volunteers. Depends obviously on the charity, but for the most part, if you look at the volunteering statistics, it has been very heavily female oriented. However, what has happened in the last few years is that women have gotten more and more responsible positions as in running these organizations. And in fact, the Sisters of Lateral and Sisters of St. Joseph were leaders in that regard. I was always very admiring of the Sisters of St. Joseph and their leadership skills. So I would say that that's been quite a significant shift. And in terms of the role, how charities expect things from women, I think that my own sense, just talking to people and the ones that we're involved with, we're kind of gender neutral, right? No matter what one's affiliation is, what gender one affiliates with, there's much more of a sense of we have to look more broadly and try and welcome very inclusively, much more emphasis on inclusiveness in as charities look at potential donors and the community they can engage with.
I would say the other thing that's happening that's quite exciting is that you're now not only seeing women donors sort of invest in these institutions, but you're seeing the institutions themselves look within and start to look at women's issues within the issues that they're dealing with. So one of the examples that comes right to mind is CanH, Women Mind. This is a community of women that are donors that are supporting the investment in women scientists who are researching mental health issues in women. And one of the things that is becoming more talked about, but it's very obviously known for a long time, is that a lot of the research has been always done on men, and then sort of the solution has just been applied to women arbitrarily. And women, we have different bodies, we have different needs, and we have to invest in women scientists to really understand how these diseases manifest in our own bodies. And there are also other diseases that are specific to women. And so we're starting to see, which is really exciting, women who are coming into money and sort of have access to large amounts of money invest in issues that are related to women. And the amazing thing that happened last week, you may have seen the news, is Melinda Gates coming out, and she is completely separated from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, and she's now launching her own, well, she already had her own foundation, but now she's fully investing in her own foundation. And then the next 2 years, she stated she's going to give $1 billion to women's rights. And so there's a leading example of a woman who has the capacity to give and is actually choosing an issue that is really important to women. And I think that's huge. And I think it's really exciting. And I think that's the future.
Yeah, another area, if you look at arts organizations, arts charities, much more emphasis now on female artists in galleries, much more emphasis in the theater and in concerts on female composers. I believe you have a project where you want to resurrect and recognize the women who have built St. Mike's. So all kind of a sense of the hidden histories are there, and everyone is trying to bring them to light and recognize them, which is very exciting.
Thank you. So I think we're getting close to, so we'll just do our last question and then we'll open it up. So we'll do our last question and then we'll open it up for discussion. And that's, do you have any specific advice for St. Mike's alumni? How can they maximize the impact of their money here at St. Mike's, in Toronto, and the broader world at large?
Well, I think I have a simple answer, which is get involved with the A14W initiative, because when Brenda called me up, I will admit that one of my quarrels with the Catholic Church, and it started in high school when I observed how extremely deferential the nuns were to the priests. I observed this hierarchy, which I felt was unfair. So I think this initiative is fantastic, and get involved.
Two things. First of all, when you're thinking about philanthropy, there's a shorthand, or you can think about it in terms of the 5 T's. You can give your treasure, of course, which is your money, but you can also give of your time, your talent. That's your specific gifts, your expertise that you can bring to the table. You can give your ties, your time, your talent, your ties, which is your network, your community of people, so you can sort of like, and your advocacy. There's another T. This one has to do with sort of like you're using your voice to advocate for that issue. You're talking. Sorry, I messed that up. 5 T's of philanthropy. I just want to make sure that the message is philanthropy is about more than just money. Your testimony, your treasure, your time, your talent, your ties, and your testimony. It's the 5 T's of philanthropy. And so philanthropy is much bigger than just money, and I would encourage you to think about how you're going to give in each of those domains. And then the second thing I would encourage you is to think about it not as a transactional relationship, but as a relationship that will develop over time. You know, it's really amazing to be involved with an institution and start to learn more about them and understand what they really need. And that happens over time. And I think sort of you can start somewhere and give something and then just commit to sort of doing that every year and staying engaged and meeting the people and understanding issues, because that's the best way that you can actually help that institution. If you start with a curiosity and understanding of what they need and what's really valuable to them at that moment. And that comes with deep relationship and deep conversation. So I would encourage it to be a relationship and not a transaction.
This has been a very wonderful session. Thank you so very much for your time, and thank you to all of you for joining us today.